my name is Jeanette, and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. So today I'm coming at you with some recommendations and some possibilities for the January Readathon that I am co-hosting called Epistolary January. So I am co-hosting this with Anne from In Search of Wonder, Miriam from Miriam Elizabeth Reads, Kelli from Kelli Reads a Lot, and Cheryle from Candlewick Library. Okay, so I did an announcement video, so I will link that video below along with all the other ladies' channels, so you can go, because they've also put up recommendation videos, and if they haven't yet, they are going to. And so I have the bingo board that Anne created, and then the prompts. So because the prompts, you can fit multiple books in different prompts, and there's certain ones that I can't give you recommendations for because, like, it's free shipping a book you got for free. I don't know what books you've got for free. So basically, I'm just going to give you recommendations and you can fit them in various prompts. I will tell you if they fit certain prompts. And I do not have many full epistolary novels. Most of these have a bit of epistolary thrown into them. I can only think of one that is like a good half of it is written in epistolary style, and then I have one novella that is full epistolary. I'm not a big classics reader, and the couple that I have read I would not recommend personally that fit into the style, so I'm not even going to mention them. But that's just my own taste. But every time I come across a letter or a journal entry in a book, I get very excited about it. And so that's kind of what I've pulled out here, those ones. Okay, so the first one I have for you, let's go with the sets, the series, where all three books include a style. I just have a mess of books over here. Okay. Oh, actually, do all three books of this one have? I don't own these books physically, so I couldn't flip through them to look, but one that immediately came to mind was A Distant Melody by Sarah Sundin. In this one, we've got letters that are being exchanged between two people that basically pen pals style, and one is overseas fighting in the war and one is back home. And it is book one of a series. I can't think of what the series is called, but A Distant Melody was great, and as soon as I finished it, I immediately had to buy book 2 and book 3 on my Kindle so that I could finish reading the series because I love it. I just do not remember if books 2 and 3 have letters in them or not. But the reason I thought of that, because the other series by Sarah Sundin is Sunrise at Normandy. So book 1 is The Sea Before Us, book 2 is The Sky Above Us, and book 3 is The Land Beneath Us. Each one of these books has letters being exchanged, correspondence being exchanged between various people. One set of letters is between a husband and wife, one set of letters is between like a son and his parents, or a son and his brothers, okay? And so that's kind of mixed in all three of these books. They really do have to be read in order, this series, because you're following the same family of like the three sons. And so there's a lot of back history that you learn as you go along. So they really do need to be read in order. I absolutely loved this series, with book 3 being my favorite. So yes, I would highly recommend this one. Okay, and then another series is, okay, so that one fits into the correspondence because they're exchanging letters. Okay, another series is the Dear Mrs. Bird series. So book 1 is Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Price. Book 2 is Yours Cheerfully, and book 3 is Mrs. Porter Calling. Yes, my set doesn't match, but that's okay. So I have only read book one, but flipping through these two, I do know that they also have some sort of letters or something along that line in them. So I'm just going to talk about book one because this is a possibility for me. So book one, Emmeline starts working at a magazine. Yeah, I think it's a magazine. She ends up, like kind of Dear Mrs. Bird, she ends up responding to letters that have been written to this magazine. And so she's providing answers to some of the letters. Okay, and the last full series that I'm going to mention is the Skyar series by Pepper Basham. So book one is Authentically Izzy, book two is Positively Penelope, and book three is Loyally Luke. Now, this is the one that is, at least 50% of it is completely epistolary style. You are following emails between people, and then as you get a little bit further, like good halfway through it, then it starts to be text and some in-person interactions as well. So it becomes like a third-person narrative, but there's also text and emails that continue throughout. And each books 2 and 3 are the exact same way. There is emails and texts that are being sent between people. So this one will definitely fit in the epistolary romance prompt, and it will also fit in the emails or text prompt. Oh, I just remembered another full series. Doesn't help when I don't own all the books of the series that I don't see it there. Okay. That is the Bradford Sisters series. So there is a novella that starts this one off called Then Came You. This one is completely epistolary. You're following journal entries. I loved this book. Like, I loved it. It's got to be my favorite novella that I've ever read. And so that one introduces you to the parents of the Bradford sisters. Then book one is True to You. And then book two is Falling for You. And book three is Sweet on You. And for basically books 1, 2, and 3, True to You, Falling for You, and Sweet on You, each chapter ends with text or letters. Mainly text, but this one, for example, is an article from a newspaper you're reading. So, and I love this series. This is a series that I want to go back and reread because I just love it. Okay, then I have Yours Truly Thomas by Rachel Fordham. So there's this one where, what's her name? Penny works at the dead letter office, so she's reading letters and trying to return them to the sender or trying to get them to the recipient. So there are definitely letters involved in this one. Another Rachel Fordham book is The Letter Tree, which you're following pen pals who have been writing notes to each other and leaving them in a tree to find. It's so cute. I loved it. And it's set in Buffalo. It's historic. And I loved it. This one is starts in Washington, I think, and then ends up in Iowa. Again, I loved it. Both these books were 5 stars for me. Okay, then going for an older book, I have True Valor by D. Henderson. This is book 2 of the Uncommon Heroes series. However, this is a series that does not need to be read in order. You do meet these characters very briefly in book 1, so you kind of know who they are, but that's all. You don't really know much about them. And so this one follows a romance taking place while they're both serving overseas in 2 different bases. And so they are writing letters back and forth. And you watch the romance develop through the letters. Again, I loved it. Okay, then we've got The Blackout Book Club by Amy Lynn Green. and you are following, I'm so bad with main character names. Avis is her name, is it? I think Avis is her name. And so she has taken over as a librarian for her brother, who has had to go off to serve in the war. And she does not have a love with books, but she's trying to keep the library open for him. And then we're following a couple other characters as well, who none of them really seem to have any connections or seem to like have anything in common with each other. But a book club forms, and that's how they start communicating back and forth. And at the end of, every 3-4 chapters, I would say, so it's not a lot, but there are notebook entries where they're recording, like writing down their experience of that book club. And different characters take turns writing those entries, and the entries are hilarious. That was probably my favorite part of this book. I loved the book, but I was so excited when it's like, oh, there's a notebook entry. And it really got you into that character's head, and it was so fun. I highly recommend this book. Okay, then we have The Secrets of Paper and Ink by Lindsay Harrell. And this one we are following Sophia, who has just experienced a traumatic incident. And after a leave at work, she realizes she is not ready to go back to work. So she goes from America to Cornwall, England, and ends up getting a job at a bookstore. And she's living in the apartment above the bookstore. She gets to know the bookstore owner, Ginny. And we're kind of following these two ladies because Ginny's also going through her own challenges. And they discover a journal from 150 years ago. And so then they're reading the journal entries and trying to figure out answers to the journal, or what happened to the person that wrote this journal, and did their dreams come true and stuff. I really enjoyed this book. The setting is great. The characters are great, and you feel their pain, but then you see things improve for them, and it's heartwarming and uplifting, and I just loved it. Okay, and then speaking of journal entries, Sparkle and Silver by Liz Johnson. This is book number 1 of her Georgia Coast romance series. And in this one, we are following Millie. I have an advanced reader copy, so I don't have the description on the back of the book that tells me the character's name. Let me pull it up here. Oh, I was right on the character's name. Wow. 90 years ago, Millie's great-grandmother was a guest at the oil tycoon Howard Dawkins' estate on the shores of St. Simon's Island, Georgia. Now Millie plays a 1920s era guest during tours of that manor. But when her grandmother suggests that there is a lost diary containing the location of a hidden treasure on the estate, along with the true identity of Millie's great-grandfather, Millie sets out to find the truth of her heritage and the fortune that might be hers. When security guard Ben discovers her snooping in the estate's private library, he threatens to have her fired. But her story seems almost too good to be fiction, and her offer to split the treasure is too tempting to pass up. So, do they find the diary? Yes, they do. And so then they're reading the diary and trying to figure out what this treasure is and finding it. Again, I really enjoyed this story. And we have Hope Between the Pages by Pepper Basham. This one is a dual timeline. We are following Clara in the present timeline, who is trying to save the family bookstore, and then Emily, I don't know, it doesn't tell me on the back. In the historic timeline, the female character was working at the library at the Biltmore Mansion, and then there are notes left between, I want to say Emily, I could be wrong, and another character, and Claire discovers some of these notes, and so we dig into the romance that developed through the notes. Now, this one I really love the historic timeline much more than the present day timeline. I just want to stay in the past and find out all that story and spend more time with those characters. He Should Have Told the Bees by Amanda Cox. There is a few letters in this, not a ton of letters, but there's letters, so I had to mention it. And so in this one, we are following Beckett Walsh, who has just recently lost her father and assumes that the farm will be left to her because it was just her and her father that lived on the farm. Turns out he has left half the farm to somebody else, and she doesn't know why, and this other person doesn't know why they were left it. And so they're trying to figure out that mystery of what's going on and what are they going to do, because their goals are different. One wants to sell, one wants to keep. Can they come together? And what does this mean for their futures? So then they do come across some letters that does provide a few little answers. Okay, just let me check my notes, and is that all of them? No, it's not. Okay. So, because I don't have everything physically, so I've written down some books that I don't know. Okay. So then there is Things We Didn't Say by Amy Lynn Green. And this one, I would say, is pretty epistolary heavy. You've got newspaper clippings, you've got letters between people, and it is set in World War II, but in Minnesota. I think it's Minnesota. So it's a German war camp in the States, and somebody ends up going, the main character we're following ends up working there and having to translate a bunch of letters to make sure that secrets aren't being shared, things like that. And then things kind of develop from there. And yeah, so there's a lot of newspaper journal entries, letters to the lawyers, things like that. I would say this one's pretty epistolary heavy. So the possibilities for me are, I could continue in the Dear Mrs. Bird series and read Yours Cheerfully and then Mrs. Porter Calling. I haven't read either one of these, so that would be continuing a series. This is book 2, this is book 3. But the other one that I had on my shelf that I immediately thought, oh, I'm going to read that in January, is With Every Letter by Sarah Sundin. This is book 1 of her Wings of Nightingale series, and I am so excited for this book. I don't really know a lot about it because I like to go into her books blind, and I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of letters just based on the title. And the tagline at the back says, they know everything about each other except their real names. So if they don't know their real names, are they writing? It does say she's not looking forward to writing a letter to a man she's never met. So, I mean, she writes at least one letter. So, yeah, I really want to read this book, and I really want to read all of Sarah Sundin's books. So this one, yeah. Okay, then the ones that I do not own physically is Our Yellow Tape Letters by Caitlin Miller. And this one says, just days away from Germany's surrender, Lucy never expects to receive the same telegram that thousands of families across the world have since the start of World War II, a notice of her brother's death in the service of his country. While reeling from the shock of losing her best friend, Lucy receives a letter from someone who knew her brother and can tell her 2 things she desperately wants to know: what her brother was like in the army and who is responsible for his death. Jeremiah wakes up in an army hospital, unable to remember what put him there, why he can't hear anything, or who he lost. When memories resurface of a plane crash, a parachute, and a friend, Jeremiah harbors deep guilt and secrets. Jeremiah sends a letter of his own to Lucy, and his words open a door that may cost him more than he realizes. Everyone has secrets to unearth and stories to tell. War, loss, and letters. They're a lot like yellow tape. Once you cross the line, there is no going back. And sometimes what you find on the other side looks nothing like you imagined it to be. So this one has been on my list for a while, and it is available on Kindle Unlimited, which I have just gotten. So yeah, I really want to read this one. Okay, then another one that looks interesting, but I don't know a lot about it. And I've only read a couple other books by this author, and honestly, they weren't really my favorites. But this one sounds good. And it's The Berlin Letters by Catherine Ray. So it says, near the end of the Cold War, a CIA code breaker discovers a symbol she recognizes from her childhood, which launches her across the world to the heart of Berlin just before the wall comes tumbling down. November of 1989, after finding a secret cache of letters with intelligence buried in the text, CIA cryptographer Louisa learns that not only is her father alive, but he is languishing in an East Germany Stasi jail. After piecing together the letters with a series of articles her grandfather saved, Louisa seeks out journalists Bran Bishop and Daniel Rudd. They send her to the CIA, to Andrew Cademan, her boss. Louisa confronts Cademan and learns that nothing is a coincidence, but he will not help free her father. So she takes matters into her own hands, empties her bank account, and flies to West Berlin. As the adrenaline wears off and she recognizes that she has no idea how to proceed, Louisa is both relieved and surprised when a friend shows up with contacts and a plan to sneak her across the wall. Alternating storylines between Louisa and her father, The Berlin Letters shows the early days of the wall, bringing Berlin and the epic center of the Cold War to life, while also sharing one family's journey through secrets, lies, and division to love, freedom, and reconciliation. Okay, and then the last one is The London House, which is also by Catherine Ray. And it says, uncovering a dark family secret sends one woman through the history of Britain's World War II spy network and glamorous 1930s Paris to save her family's reputation. Carolyn thinks it's just another day of work until she receives a call from Matt Hammond, an old college friend and historian. But pleasantries are cut short. Matt has uncovered a scandalous secret kept buried for decades. In World War II, Caroline's British great-aunt betrayed family and country to marry her German lover. Determined to find answers and save her family's reputation, Caroline flies to her family's ancestral home in London. She and Matt discover diaries and letters that reveal her grandmother and great-aunt were known as the Waite sisters. Popular and witty, they came of age during the interwar years, a time of peace and luxury filled with dances, jazz clubs, and romance. The tone of correspondence soon yields to sadder revelations as the sisters grow apart and one leaves home for the glittering fashion scenes of Paris, despite rumblings of a coming world war. Each letter brings more questions. Was Caroline's great-aunt actually a traitor and a Nazi collaborator? Or is there a more complex truth buried in the past? Together, Caroline and Matt uncover stories of spies, secrets, love, and heartbreak, and the events of one fateful evening in 1941 that changed everything. That one sounds really good too, right? And I am just realizing that all the ones that I mentioned as possibilities are all historical. Is there a contemporary one that you have to recommend to me? I'd love to know if you've read any of these or if you have some other recommendations for me, because I do not have enough books to fit every single prompt for this readathon, and I really want to complete every single prompt. So I would love your recommendations. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.